Hey guys, what's up? Welcome into another episode of Sports Beat Kansas City, or Sports Beat KC, I guess is what we call it. This is Rustin Dodd of the Kansas City Star, here with Sam Mellinger. We are back with some Royals discussion after a kind of a break for the offseason. Sam has obviously been busy following the Chiefs, and I've been kind of working here and there, but trying to take some time off. You know how it is, Sam, you know.
I do. You need some rest in time.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we're going to sort of catch things up on the Royals offseason heading into the winter meetings, which are next week in National Harbor, Maryland, which is just outside D.C. Royals will be heading there. Kind of their brain trust will be heading there on Sunday, and things will be getting started on Monday, and we will see if maybe these winter meetings can sort of push the Royals into motion after what has been sort of a pretty quiet offseason so far, although maybe not unexpectedly quiet, but a quiet offseason nonetheless. But let's start with some news right off the top. It is Thursday morning, and late last night on Wednesday night, the new collective bargaining agreement was put into place and agreed upon by both sides, the union and the league. And Sam, I just want to touch on a few things here. You know, this was not unexpected. I mean, I think maybe we overstate the importance that the baseball has had labor peace for almost like 2 decades now, or more than 2 decades. But I do think that most people expected that this deal was going to get done, if not last night, then, you know, relatively quickly. But I guess let's just this is a lot of inside baseball stuff, a lot of, you know, little things here and there, but is there anything in the new CBA that you think maybe Royals fans should be paying attention to, specifically the way this might affect their draft pick compensation for all these free agents they have coming up next year?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess a couple qualifiers. I haven't had time yet to go through it. I mean, the whole thing's not out yet, but I've kind of perused a lot of the reports. It seems like the penalties for signing free agents have been lowered, and the compensation for losing free agents has been lowered. I think both of those things negatively impact the Royals more than most teams, and even more than that, the timing of this negatively impacts the Royals. They're still going to lose a first-round pick for signing Ian Kennedy last year. They will not receive first-round picks for losing, presumably, Eric Hosmer and perhaps others after the 2017 season. So in that way, it's, you know, that's significant. And I think that I haven't talked to, you know, Dayton or JJ or those guys specifically about this, but I would imagine that is frustrating for them. And I would empathize with that frustration. I think that's real. The other thing is that I think, you know, Royals fans might pay attention to, and this is super inside baseball, but there's an international spending limit of, I believe, $5 million, and that's just a hard cap. So nobody can go over it. In theory, the Royals might be able to benefit from that. They believe strongly in their international scouts. Renee Francisco does a terrific job heading their international scouting department. So in theory, if nobody can outspend anyone else, the Royals should feel like they have an advantage just based on the relationships and the scouts that they have, you know, in the Dominican and other parts of Latin America. In reality, and I think that's real, but it used to be without a spending cap on that, the Royals were actually taking advantage of, you know, what might be described as a loophole and outspending a lot of teams. And, you know, it didn't work out, but, you know, they outspent the Red Sox and I think the Yankees for Noel Arguelles, a left-handed pitcher from, and now I can't remember if he was from the Dominican or Cuba.
I think he was from Cuba.
From Cuba, yeah. So, you know, obviously that didn't work out. Noel Arguelles is like playing in the T-Bones League now. But it's an example of, you know, the Royals being able to acquire, in theory, more talent than some of their competitors. So, but I actually think more than how that affects the Royals, I think that's really interesting in kind of a broader sense, because if I'm right, that's the first time that there's been a hard cap set in Major League Baseball. That is the first time that the players union has allowed a hard salary cap in effect to be set. And I think that is significant. There's already, I think some agents are calling it a soft cap on payroll in general, because there's as much of a 92% luxury tax now if you go over a certain threshold. So, baseball is slowly creeping toward, more of a salary cap system.
Yeah, I mean, you see that, I guess, in all sports where labor unions tend to cave mostly for the guys that are not actually part of their union yet. But yeah, it is interesting because, like you were making this point, in theory, I think in the long run, anytime there's a spending cap, it is actually, I think it benefits the Royals. On the other hand, I think we've seen the way the draft compensation in the normal amateur draft, how some of the overslot signings and some of the caps in terms of the kind of the pool of money you can spend on that, I think that did negatively affect the Royals, in the last 3 to 5 years, just because, from about 2006 to 2011, they sort of found an inefficiency in the draft where they were really overspending for talented players, and then they couldn't really do that the last 3 to 5 years. On the other hand, at some point, the Cubs or the Red Sox or the Yankees or all those teams were going to sort of understand the value of the draft, even if if it took them longer, and even if the Royals sort of exploited that system, more, and teams like the Pirates were doing the same thing. Even if they did, find that inefficiency, at some point it was gonna, even out, and teams like the Yankees could blow them away in the draft anyway. So I think anytime there's a cap, it does help the Royals, even if in the short term they might be thinking, well, we're already one of the best international systems in baseball, or we already have one of the best international groups in terms of scouting and finding players. So any kind of cap might hurt them in the short run, but I think in the long term, it's probably benefits a team like the Royals. So anyway, Sam, also, did you see this? This came out this morning that the All-Star game does not going to affect the World Series home field advantage anymore. So that is no longer it's no longer a column for guys to write like you once a year.
Right. Like, am I the only one that think, like, I don't get all the energy that people have spent on this at all. Like, it was just, it's not rocket science before when it just alternated year to year. And the same thing is true now. I just like the All-Star game was never like, this time it counts. Like, that was all BS, but like, cause it was still managed and played the same way, as managed and played as an exhibition. I just don't get, like, there seems to be this, feeling from a lot of people in and around baseball of like, free at last. Like, now we no longer have to put up with this, this time it counts BS. I'm kind of like, were we putting up with it before? Like, did anybody really believe that it was like super important?
Well, I mean, it did affect the home field advantage, and it was, I
for sure, but like it didn't affect how the game was played.
No,
it didn't affect,
which made it even more of a farce in some ways. I mean, it almost made the farce even more real because it's not like teams were taking it seriously, and you were still having an all-star from every single team, even so. Yeah, I do think. Go ahead.
I look at it like if your neighbor, this is probably a terrible analogy, but like I look at it, if your neighbor across the street has like an ugly Christmas wreath on their front door that you just hate, and now they've taken it down, like maybe you're happy, you're no longer annoyed when you look over there, but it doesn't affect your life. It doesn't affect how anything, operates at all. I guess I don't know. There's been way too much energy and way too many words spent on this topic, I think, than is warranted.
I agree. And our friend Adam Kilgore at the Washington Post wrote a brief little blog column this morning about how he's actually going to miss it, and how that baseball should have stuck with it. And it's a very kind of contrarian viewpoint, but I actually sort of agree on this one like little level. Like, yeah, it was arbitrary and it was stupid and it made no sense, and it was like not the right way that you should be assigning home field advantage in the World Series. But what is the right way? I mean, they're going to have the pennant winner with the best record have home field advantage. Well, baseball has unbalanced schedules, like incredibly unbalanced when you're playing all those teams in your division. So it's not, unlikely that a team is going to win like 96 games in a bad division and have home field advantage over a 95 win team in a really good division. It's just that.
Yeah, no, I think about the NL Central.
Yeah,
for sure.
That system seems just as arbitrary as assigning it to some stupid exhibition game. And it was.
Of course it is. Of course, but that's the whole point, right? Like, it's all arbitrary. So, like, let's stop pretending that, like, now is this great. Like, they could have the two managers have an arm wrestling contest, which I think would actually be hilarious and awesome, and have that on August 1st or October 1st, like the start of the playoffs, and let that decide. I mean, it's just like, who cares? Like, whatever we do, it's going to be arbitrary.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's stop.
Sorry, Rustin.
Let's stop talking about it then. All right, Sam. Let's get on into the Royals offseason. It is today the first day of December? Have we already got to December now? Is this December?
It is.
So
I paid my mortgage last night.
Oh man. So it's December 1st, and the Royals.
Don't get old.
If you want to go down the list of what the Royals have accomplished this offseason in terms of adding, they have subtracted a few pieces. They have signed catcher Drew Butera to a 2-year, $3.8 million deal, and that, I think, is basically all they've done. So I've also added some guys to the 40-man roster. They let Kendrys Morales and Edinson Volquez walk. Both those guys have now signed. Morales with the Blue Jays, Volquez earlier this week with the Miami Marlins for a 2-year, $22 million deal, which, man, I guess that shows the market in this offseason for pitching, because I did not think Edinson Volquez was going to get much more than a 1-year deal. And he got 2 years, $22 million. Mm-hmm. So it's not a lot, but that still sort of surprised me, considering he had, I think, maybe was bottom 5 last year in the ERA in the American League, and also I think he gave up the most earned runs in baseball. And he stayed healthy for most of the year and pitched 190 innings, so there's some value there, but that did surprise me. Mm-hmm. But to this point, the Royals have been quiet, and they've kind of maintained their stance that they are financially constricted heading into this offseason, that their payroll is not going to be much higher than the $140-some million that they spent last year. So where are we with the Royals in terms of expecting what they do over the next couple of weeks, and maybe what reality ends up being? I mean, what do we think they should do, and what do you think they're actually going to end up doing over the next 3 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, so each day that goes by, I believe more and more their stance about a payroll freeze. In the beginning of the offseason, I kind of thought we've gone through this dance before. In past off seasons, I want to double check it to make sure, but I believe that this is true, that in past off seasons, their opening day payrolls ended up being, $10-15 million more than what they said, originally going into the off season. But I believe them this time. And I believe them a little bit more and more each day. And the way that I understand it, the way that, and maybe my, hashtag math is off on this, but I think that if they just stay pat right now and don't do a thing, with, once you project in arbitration raises and contractual raises for guys like, Alex Gordon and Ian Kennedy, I think their opening day payroll is projected to be about 148, somewhere around there, 148 million, maybe a little bit less, but right in that.
We talked about this off air. I think it gets to 148 or gets to that neighborhood if you count Omar Infante. Did you mention him?
Yeah, and I'll bet you I know who does count Omar Infante, and that's David Glass. So that is part of is definitely part of the calculus.
Just for the record, he's going to make $10 million next year from the Kansas City Royals. So
8 plus a $2 million buyout. Yeah.
Yes.
So that being said, I don't think that they're stuck. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they make a major move, but to make a major move, they're going to have to trade somebody. So I thought that Josh Reddick would make a lot of sense for the Royals. Josh Reddick ended up signing, I believe it was 4 years, $52 million with the Astros. that would not have been out of, the Royals could have done something like that, but then they would have had to dump, Wade Davis or, Lorenzo Kane. They would have had to move dollar for dollar. It's like a bouncer at a really busy college bar, like one in, one out is basically like where the Royals are right now. So I don't think, I think that they're going to continue to explore trade possibilities mostly, maybe some free agents, but I think trade possibilities where they can, trade away Wade Davis. He seems like the more I think about it, he seems like the most likely guy to go because they have a replacement. Kelvin Herrera is a badass closer and he could do the job. And if they can get somebody to give, healthy value of Wade Davis instead of, the twice on the disabled list in 2015 Wade Davis, they can get something in return that they could plug in right field and get some offense. So that would be, if there's a major move done this offseason, that's what I would expect it to be. But I really do. And then look, obviously I could be wrong about this, but I believe them about the payroll. I believe them about the payroll this year more than I have in any other year.
Yeah, I do think that they've been consistent about it. And, I wrote about this when the offseason started, but I also wrote about it down at the GM meetings I guess I was at the beginning of the month, I guess after the World Series. And, I was talking with Dayton Moore, and the conversation was a little bit about Kendrys Morales, if they were interested in bringing him back. And he said, sure, Kendrys was a good productive hitter for them, was key for their 2015 World Championship. And it was, sort of a stock answer in terms of, for the most part, if a guy's a free agent, teams say, yeah, we'd like to have him back. I mean, obviously the caveats are at the right price and all those sort of things. So then I sort of followed up with, well, if you don't get Kendrys Morales back, do you feel like you need to add another bat just to, whether it's in right field or a DH or, second base or some combination of the two? Do you feel like you need to add some offense? Because they had a lot of injuries obviously last year, but they still were 13th in the American League in runs scored, and the offense was probably quietly maybe the biggest issue for the Royals. Even though the bullpen and some other issues were kind of at the forefront. And his answer sort of surprised me a little bit, in that the answer was essentially well, don't get too hung up on what the roster looks like heading into spring training. Don't be so narrowly focused on what it looks like, heading into spring training. And you mentioned the 2015 season about how they added, Ben Zobrist and Johnny Cueto during the middle of the season. And they started well, and then they added some pieces and they added payroll during the middle of the year, and they were able to do that. And it just sort of struck me as sort of a signal or sort of, an indication that this may end up being essentially what the Royals team is right now. What they are right now might just end up being the team, and they might have to go into it thinking, we're going to give this group one more chance during the first half of the season, and if it looks like we're in contention, then maybe we go out and try to add some pieces like they did in 2015. And I don't think that's a great analogy because I think we've talked about this before offline. I mean, before the 2015 season, they signed Kendrys Morales and they signed Edinson Volquez.
Right.
But I do think that may be a little bit what the Royals are thinking right now in terms of their offseason strategy is kind of giving this core one more run at it. But I do think that they got to add pieces somewhere, not necessarily big free agent pieces, but I do think that they need to add a bat, and they need to add some sort of starting pitching, whether it's just a veteran filler piece that is more depth or whatever. I mean, I think they're going to have to add somebody somewhere, and their bullpen might need a little bit of work as well. So I feel like that they have these financial constraints, but I do think it is a little bit like this may not be the time to go cheap in terms of, and not to say that they are going cheap because they had a record payroll last year and they're still going to have a very high payroll relative to what their history has been. But this may not be the year to clutch every penny with what they have and what they could have if they added another piece around their core this offseason. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm gonna write about this at some point, probably pretty soon. But no, I totally agree. And that line by Dayton about don't get hung up on what the team looks like going into camp or coming out of camp. I get why he says that, but I also think that it's spin because you mentioned they did sign Volquez and Morales that offseason. So they had a better team then, a better roster than they do now. And they had more in the system that they could trade back then.
Yeah.
That's how they got, Cueto and Dobris, because they had still it wasn't as good as the farm system was in whatever, '08 or 2010 or whatever, but it was still a pretty good farm system. They had all these left-handed arms that they could go get guys. Now the Royals believe internally, they think that they're not totally pumped up about where their farm system is, but all things considered, what they've had to deal away to have the success that they've had the last few years, they like their arms in particular. They think they've got some potential starters and certainly some bullpen help there. But around the industry, I think it's fair to say that the Royals farm system right now is viewed as inferior to what it was 2 years ago. And so they're going to have less capital to go get guys. David Glass has not, one thing, and we've written it in the paper, we've talked about it here, but I think people forget this sometimes, even in 2015, when they had this really, really good team, the best in the American League, and they were contending and making, buyers trades, David Glass still wouldn't take on any extra payroll. So unless he reverses that stance, which I think is a long shot at best, considering how he's handling this offseason, they're going to have to give up even more. They're going to have to give up even more talent to acquire big league talent, and I just don't know that they have the depth of talent in the farm system. So I totally agree with you. It's a bad look, I believe, for David Glass to approach the offseason this way. I think if people criticize him, it's fair criticism. I think you've got one more year with this core, and I know that they're trying to stretch that window out, right? Like and the first year of this didn't go particularly well, but that's why they signed Gordon to a long-term deal. That's why they have Ian Kennedy. I know he has the opt-out, but a long-term deal. Sal Perez for a long-term deal. They're trying to stretch out that window a little bit, but let's be honest, Eric Hosmer is going to be playing for somebody else in 2018. And, this is the last year that you have that homegrown championship core completely together. And it just, to me, it just seems like a bad look, almost a shame to not support that core as much as you can.
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing they can do for payroll flexibility, and we've written this, but, if the dollar for dollar, if trading away Wade Davis is not quite as much money as, the bat probably that you bring in, they can still sign, Danny Duffy, for instance, to a long-term deal and backload it so that the 2017 payroll remains the same. So they've got a tiny bit of flexibility, but if there's a name that makes people excited about the Royals acquiring this offseason, I believe there's a 99.9% chance that means that there's a name that people are going to be sad to see leaving.
Yeah. These are projections from MLB Trade Rumors, but I was going over the arbitration estimates. But Danny Duffy is estimated to get $8.2 million when everything would be settled in arbitration or just a settlement. Or I don't exactly know how they do their adjustments, but that's maybe $18.2 million. Kelvin Herrera, we've talked about him too as being a possibility guy that they could extend and maybe get some payroll flexibility. He's estimated to get $5.3 million. So, yeah, let's say you backloaded a deal for both those guys. Maybe you save $4 million on Duffy and you save, 2.5 or 2 on Herrera. And then that gets you an extra $6 million to play with the payroll. So there are some options there in terms of what they could do. Sam, I know you got a lot going on, so let's be quick here. But I just want to go through kind of the biggest question marks heading into the rest of the offseason. And we've sort of hit on the big picture what they're going to do. But let's just I want to get your thoughts on some of these kind of question marks. So let's just start with the designated hitter spot, which right now I guess if if we were taking the Royals literally, is that they at the moment would be heading into spring training using Cheslor Cuthbert as their designated hitter in some form of a rotation, to give guys days off or to mix guys in or use other outfielders or Salvador Perez or Alex Gordon or Lorenzo Cain or whatever. One piece of information that's important to note is that Cheslor Cuthbert's out of options, so if he is not on the Royals' 25-man roster next year, they've got to put him through waivers, and things get a little dicey there. So they're not able to stash him in the minors anymore. So that adds a little bit of a wrinkle to this whole puzzle. But do you buy the idea of Cheslor Cuthbert and friends being the Royals' designated hitter spot? Is that a feasible, plausible option for the Royals in terms of being a team that aspires to go to the playoffs again?
Yeah, I think it's what they're going to do. It's what they've said they've wanted to do for a few off seasons now. And, I think kind of this off season, when in doubt, go with the cheaper option. Like if you're trying to figure out what the Royals are going to do. And on this particular specific point, I'm not going to criticize the Royals too much for this, if this is how they end up going. Cheslor Cuthbert had some really nice moments last year. He's young. I think I don't know when his birthday is, but he played last season at 23 years old, I believe. So he's young. You expect him to get better. He's a guy who appears to, kind of be able to handle the moment, things like that. He belongs on a big league field. I think, it's fair to say, he looks comfortable from watching him for most of a full season. And I believe that they're at a point where this is in the best interest of their other players. Like, ACL injuries aren't what they used to be, but, Mike Moustakas is still coming off a major knee surgery. And Lorenzo Cain was not healthy last year, and he's, obviously getting older. And Alex Gordon has been injured for, each of the last, 2 seasons at least, right? And he's going to be 33 next year, I think. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. Salvador Perez could use some time, at DH. Like, I think that this is all, there are real baseball reasons to want to float that DH. And so I will criticize the Royals for being cheap in, more of a macro sense, but not in this particular. I don't think that spending, whoever it would have been, a $15 million a year, pure straight DH this year. I don't, if the alternative is to maybe get a little bit less production out of that DH spot, but keep your other guys healthy so that they're more productive, I think that's a very logical, baseball thing to do. It's just, so I'll criticize them for not spending in some other ways, but in this specific way, I think it's fine.
I kind of understand the argument for it, but I do think that if you're going to use that DH as sort of a floating by committee rotation thing, to be eloquent about it, I just think, that puts that's going to put a lot of pressure on guys like Eric Hosmer and Mike Moustakas, Lorenzo Cain to be healthy and good next year, because
it also helps them be healthy and good next year. I think that's an important point.
That might be, and I think that's fair. But I think Kidris Morales, while his production was maybe a little bit overstated, he had 30 homers, but homers were kind of up across the league last year. He ended up with like 107 OPS plus. He wasn't necessarily like some, middle of the order bat that's going to be impossible to replace. On the other hand, I just think that if you're the 13th worst or 13th best lineup and run producing team in baseball last year, you need everything you can get. And I just wonder if that, they're going to be, if they have Paulo Orlando and Gerard Dyson playing right field, and you've got, a DH rotation. I just feel like that it's going to put a lot of onus on their internal guys to be to be better than they were. Most of them, for Gordon, Hosmer, Moustakas, although most of his was just injury, Kane to be healthy, all those guys. I mean, all of those guys are going to have to be.
Perez has to hit better.
Yeah, they've all got to have not just like average years for them next year. They've all got to be good. Like they've all got to be better than their career averages next year for the offense to get back to where it was in 2015, which was sort of middle of the pack. So I do think that.
Yeah, but I think that was true anyway, right? Like they were always going to need those guys to be better. Like it's past time for Eric Hosmer to have a big boy year. And I know that he, had a career high in homers. I forgot exactly what it ended up being. He drove in 100 and all that. But, if you look a little bit deeper, he wasn't nearly as productive as he needs to be. And I just think that if you're able to, keep those guys rested a little bit and healthy, you let Lorenzo Cain and Alex Gordon and Mike Moustakas and Salvador Perez, you let them. I'm not including Eric Hosmer because he can play 150 games, but in the field. But you're giving those guys their best chance to have big years, and I think that's important. And look, like there's not a lot of teams that have a full-time DH either. This is more. Or at least becoming more of the norm. So I don't have as much of a problem with this part of it, but the money that they needed to spend to me was on Josh Reddick or somebody that could play right field and help them out offensively.
Yeah.
That would have been a much bigger help than somebody who's going to clog up the DH spot 150 games.
Okay, there are there's of the list of the guys that they could go out and pursue if money was not an option. Carlos Beltran is available. He could DH and play right field sparingly, although his defense has sort of eroded over the last 5 years. Mike Napoli is a free agent if they wanted to go a more traditional DH route and replace Morales that way. Matt Holliday will probably be out of their price range, but he is also a guy who could, if he wanted to move to the American League, could DH and could play right field or left field or wherever on occasion. Brandon Moss is out there. The one guy that I've looked at, and I don't know how expensive he's going to be, but Pedro Alvarez is he's got a very high platoon split, but he hits right-handed pitching very well. So he's also a guy that would be out there and would be a cheaper option. I also think that I don't know. The two guys with the Mets, Curtis Granderson and Jay Bruce, have been getting more attention because the Mets re-signed Yoenis Cespedes, and they are likely going to have to maybe trade one of their outfielders to create some room out there. And both those guys have 1 year left on their deal. I think Granderson's going to make $15 million next year, and Bruce is going to make $13 million. And specifically, I don't know that the Royals are necessarily interested in those guys specifically, but I do think that is maybe the kind of guy, if you're looking to upgrade the offense, maybe that's how you do it, is you identify a guy with 1 year left on his deal, and you find a way to go trade for that guy, whether it's giving up a guy like a Hunter Dozier or a Cheslor Cuthbert or somebody like that. That seems to also be sort of a way forward to where you can maybe keep the payroll down. Maybe you couple that trade with the trade, a Wade Davis trade somewhere, even if it's not the same trade, maybe it is, but, maybe you send Wade Davis somewhere for some prospects, and then you also, in the meantime, flip a couple of guys for like a Curtis Granderson or somebody like that. I do think that seems like a way where you could maybe get better on offense and cut some payroll and make it work. I don't know that the Royals are going to do that. Do you think this seems like a reasonable plan, Sam?
Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in there. But now we're talking about, sacrificing defensively too, in some ways. If you're asking Carlos Beltran to play even a minute in the outfield, Curtis Granderson as well. I mean, at this point in his career, and I'll stop bringing this up after this, but that was one reason. Another reason why I thought Josh Reddick would make a lot of sense is he's athletic enough and still relatively young enough to be able to stick in the outfield, at least a corner outfield spot for a few more years. So, there's some things that they can do, but I think it's apparent that we're talking about the fringes at this point, and let's not forget that bringing on somebody who's going to make real money means giving up somebody who's going to make real money. So you're talking about, in effect, a trade of Wade Davis and Curtis Granderson. And, that's the position that the Royals are in. And there's a logical argument that they should make that trade. I'm not saying that it would be a bad trade. But that's kind of that's where we're at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Let's close with this. So we kind of hit on right field there. Second base, I think all signs point to some sort of internal combination of that position, whether it's Raul Mondesi hitting or Whit Merrifield providing a stopgap. But it doesn't necessarily look like the Royals are going to end up anywhere else other than those guys, barring some sort of trade, that unforeseen trade or unforeseen addition somewhere along the line. That seems to be general consensus and probably correct. What do you think about the Royals' fifth starter spot? I mean, they've got Chris Young, they've got Mike Minor on the roster, they've got Matt Strahm. They could sign a slew of potential bounce back veteran type guys. I mean, they could probably go get Chris Medlin and have him back on maybe even a minor league deal at this point. There's other guys available on the market: Scott Feldman, Clayton Richard, Doug Fister, Jared Weaver is available, throwing 83-mile-an-hour fastballs.
It'll be one of those four, right? Like you mentioned, Young, Strahm, Minor, and then Stomont. They're way high on. My guess is that it's going to be one of those four, and the other three will be in the bullpen.
Yeah,
right. I mean, because this is the default option, and that's the cheapest path. And again, I'm not necessarily on this point criticizing them for not spending on a fifth starter. I mean, I think their best situation would probably be Matt Strahm as their fifth starter, and assuming that he can stay healthy for a whole year. That would probably be the best case. And then you can spot. I know Chris Young had a terrible year, but the year before that he was terrific. So you can spot Chris Young, maybe 10 starts, and maybe Strahm gets the other, what would it be, 22, 23 or whatever. That would be, if we're kind of mapping out the best 2017 Royals, that might be what it looks like.
Yeah, I do think that I'm almost certain that the Royals will sign somebody just to provide depth in the rotation, because they like to have 8 or 9 potential starters, or at least guys that can start games, and I feel like they're just maybe a hair below that. But I that's why I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Chris Medlin was back in a minor league deal to see if he can finally get healthy, or somebody comparable to him, another kind of bounce back guy who's maybe had some injury issues or is cheap, just somebody that started major league games before and can kind of give them a little bit of peace of mind, even if you're sending that guy to Omaha to start the year or something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they sign, a guy like that for a minor league deal, or something to head into spring training with a few more kind of arms in the old cachet. All right, Sam, let's wrap it up. I know you got plenty of stuff going on, and I got to write about the new CBA. So anything else going on? How's the old Chiefs beat? They seem to be playing well.
They've won some games, Rustin. Somehow they have won. This is like very tangentially related to a Royals podcast. But the Chiefs have won 3 games this season, 3 out of their 11 games, 3 out of their 8 wins, in which at one point or another they had the win probability models gave them a less than a 3% chance of winning. which, that got out on Twitter, and immediately people were kind of talking about, Game 4 in Houston, or, some of the crazy stuff that the Royals have done. But yeah, it's been crazy. It's been crazy. I don't know if it's sustainable, but it's been fun so far.
Okay, cool. Sam Mellinger, I'm Rustin Dodd. Check out the podcast, SportsBeat KC. There's all sorts of ones on the Chiefs and Royals in Missouri and all sorts. You can download it at iTunes, give a review, all that kind of stuff, and then follow, obviously, the coverage at kansascity.com and in the pages of the Kansas City Star. So we will be back with another Royals podcast at some point this offseason. Maybe sooner rather than later, but we will figure that out. So thank you for listening, and we will see you guys later. Cool. Thanks, Sam.
Bye, man.